Welcome to Monday morning, Motivational Monday, one and all. Appreciate your joining us each and every time. This is Charu Das with Srimad Bhagavatam morning classes, and today our selection is let me scroll up here to the top, a lot of notes, a lot of nectarine information to go through. Today's verse is the 26th verse in the second chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. First, acknowledging our disciplic succession. Om Gana Timarandasya Gana Gana Sadakya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutade Sayam Rupakaram Darati Swa Parantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Kanamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Sri Rupam Sagaditam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Sam Sidevam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishikan Vitam Sta Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutade Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanumanimaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesa Sunivadi Praskata Desan Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktavinda Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tito Jayo Dhiret Nashta Prayashu Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Nigamal Kaparurgaritam Param Shukamakaram Rita Dravisamitam Pibata Bhagatam Rashamalaya Mahora Hora Sikabhuvi Babakaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Glad you could join us this morning, Anjali, Bill, Rupa Manjari, and others yet to come. I'm sucking on a lozenge here. Hope you'll forgive me. We had a busy weekend. We had 4 online classes yesterday, including one with the Orlando congregation at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which was 7 o'clock here. And then Krishna Light Show, then the Satsang Zoom call with the congregational members. Good morning, Govinda, Dave, and Sundari Priya, both of whom join that Zoom call regularly. And then in the evening, we had our Sunday evening program here in Spanish for Utah at 5 o'clock, and our topic was blessing yourself with your words. So a little hoarse this morning, hence there'll be rolling around inside our mouth a nice licorice lozenge, okay, so that I can not choke up in front of you here, be embarrassed. 26th verse, second chapter, first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam on Motivational Monday. Mumukshavo Godarupam Hidbabhuta Patimata Narayana Kalashanta Bhajantihi Anashuvyavaha. Translation: those who are serious about liberation are certainly non-envious, and they respect all. Yet they reject the horrible and ghastly forms of the demigods and worship only the all-blissful forms of Lord Vishnu and his plenary portions. Prabhupada writes in the purport of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is the original person of the Vishnu categories, expands himself in 2 different ways, namely integrated plenary portions and separated parts and parcels. The separated parts and parcels are the servitors, and the integrated plenary portions are the worshipable objects of service. All demigods who are empowered by the Supreme Lord are also separated parts and parcels. They do not belong to the categories of Vishnu Tattva. The Vishnu Tattvas are living beings equally as powerful as the original form of the personality of Godhead, and they display different categories of power in consideration of different times and circumstances. The separated parts and parcels are powerful by limitation. They do not have unlimited power like the Vishnu Tattvas. Therefore, one should never classify the Vishnu Tattvas or the plenary portions of Narayan, the personality of Godhead, in the same category with the parts and parcels. If anyone does so, he becomes at once an offender by the name Pashandi. In the age of Kali, many foolish persons commit such unlawful offenses and equalize the 2 categories. You understand what we're saying here? It's important to be philosophically astute and rigorous and not lazy, just like chemistry, okay? To one ignorant person, it's just chemistry. It's just all one category. No need to break it down. No need to define it. No need to have synonyms and definitions. No need to exert your mind to understand that within the broad field of chemistry, there are different items of the periodic table, and each one has their own distinct properties and qualities: smell, taste, touch, and effectiveness. That's the difference between someone who's intellectually dead or lazy and someone who's intellectually alive and vigorous. You break down things, you analyze them, you define them. That's rigorousness. That's the scientific process. Similarly, in the area of divinity, there are all kinds of categories and subcategories. If you just lump it all in, lump the living entities in, lump the demigods in, lump the Vishutatmas in, then you're not only a lazy person intellectually, even we could go so far as to say intellectually dead, but the title, non-complementary title, which is affixed to such a person, is called Pashandi. Pashandi is one who lumps in God and the demigods together and who concludes it doesn't really matter who or what you worship because it's all the same. It's all spirit. But repeatedly throughout previous days, we've stressed the fact that there are categories of spirit. I'm an American. The president is American. Sure, we have that in common. But he's the supreme American, and I'm an individual American. He has so much more power than I do. And so, if you want to be complete about it, if you want to analyze the whole picture, you have to know in what ways we're the same, but you also can't just stop there, but you have to know in what ways we're different. For instance, if you treat me like the president, you're going to invite troubles into your life. If you treat the president like me, you're going to invite troubles into your life. If you go up to the president and treat him familiarly or contemptuously, you might get strong-armed by the Secret Service into a car and put in jail. And so it's important, even though I and the president are the same, you don't interact with us the same. There's a difference between the way you interact with the president and the way you interact with me. And if you mix that up, you're going to get into big trouble, especially if you treat the president like you treat me. If you treat me like the president, I don't mind that. I'll give you permission, but you're giving me too much power. You're basically giving me, as an ordinary living entity, if you worship me, you're giving me the power to pick your pockets. You're giving me the power to take you to the cleaners. And while I wouldn't object to that, frankly, I don't think it's in your best interest. So as your friend, as your well-wisher, I would advise you not to worship an ordinary living being as God, and I would advise you against treating God as an ordinary living being. That's what this class is all about. It says here, the word Pashandi refers to non-believers engaged in fruitive activities and to idolatrous worshippers of many demigods. Pasandis do not believe in one God, the Supreme, who is Lord Vishnu. They think that all the demigods have the same potency as the Supreme. And the definition of Pasandi is given in a scripture called the Tantra Shastra. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudati Devata Shamad Benana Bhikshada Sha Pasandi Bhavedravam. So there's Narayan and his expansions, which are called Vishnu Tattva. And they are integrated. They are parts because only Krishna is the fountainhead, only Krishna is the supreme. But being absolute, he can expand himself in such a way that those expansions, Vishnu Tattva expansions, are integrated. They're not separated, but they're integrated. That means his own personal expansions in the category of Vishnu Tattva are just as powerful as him, and they're worshipable. However, there's another category of expansions which includes us and the demigods, and we're not integrated expansions, we're separated expansions. And we have power, more or less power, But that power is not unlimited. It's limited, and it's bestowed upon us by God. It's either bestowed upon us or it's withheld from us, depending on the level of our piety or impiety. If we're a very pious living being, then God can bestow upon us potency such that in your next life you can become a universal administrator, a demigod with vast powers like Brahma or Kali or Durga or any other number of demigods that we can name. There are 33 million demigods who administrate each and every universe. You might consider that a large number, but even in the city of Spanish Fork, which has maybe 30,000 people, I'm sure there are at least 200 or 300 people engaged in maintaining the roads, the electricity, the water, the power. So if even a small little burg like Spanish Fork has 200 to 300 people on their payroll, to have 33 million demigods controlling light, electricity, water, crops within a given universe is probably, when you give it a second thought, a pretty lean number after all. Now, we live in Mormon, Utah, and the Mormons talk about becoming God a lot. And that gets them in trouble with the Christians because there's only one God and you can't become God, basically. There's one God and the position is occupied. There's no vacancy, so you cannot become God. And so when you talk about becoming God or singular without putting an S at the end of it, on the face of it, that seems to be heresy. That seems to be blasphemy. There's an anti-Mormon book called The God Makers. I haven't read it. But in our semantics, I think we solve that problem by either adding an S to the end of the word and not capitalizing God, but keeping it small caps with an S on. In other words, you can become gods. You can't become God, but you can become gods. There's a saying by one of the Mormon prophets, I think it was Lorenzo Snow. He said, as God is, man will become. As man is, God was. So the problem there is that the word God is used singular, and God means one. So how can I become God? Because there's only one God, and he's already there. He's been there since the beginning of time. He preceded the sun, moon, and star. How am I going to become God? It's not possible. It's an oxymoron. You don't become God. But those of us who are pious and righteous, we can become gods, small G-O-D. We cannot become the only singular God, capital G, capital O, capital D, but we can become small g, small o, small d, small s by virtue of pious and righteousness. But here's a suggestion. So we don't lump everything in and cause confusion. Why don't, instead of saying God, which gets you into a lot of hot water, instead of saying gods, which is also murky waters at best, I have a suggestion. Let's say demigods. Now let's plug that word into Lorenzo Snow's little pithy saying, and I think we're all going to be happy, even the critics. As demigod is, man will become. As man is, demigods were. Simple. Quid pro Om Tat Sat, QED, isn't it? In other words, you and I, by virtue of pious and righteousness and charity and philanthropy executed in this life, we can be promoted after death and elevated to the planets of the demigods, where we enjoy a much higher standard of living, great longevity into the hundreds of thousands of years. There's a responsibility every time you get a blessing. There's also a burden that comes along with that. And so the demigods have the responsibility of maintaining the universal cosmos, seasonal changes, rising and setting of the sun, just making sure that everything goes on nicely. Now, that's a demigod, and you can become a demigod, but neither you nor the demigods can become, nor should they be worshipped on the level of God. And people who lump it all in and say it doesn't matter who you worship, or they say the purpose of worshiping God or the demigods is material aggrandizement, material acquisition. In either category, one is called basically an atheist or a pasandi. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was propagating the chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, 500 years ago in Bengal, this is where our Hare Krishna movement started, and our preceptor was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was Krishna in a devotional form. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was criticized by the local caste Brahmins. They went to the local Muslim magistrate, the Qazi, and they suggested that this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is causing social disruption because he's encouraging all the lower caste people to chant Hare Krishna in order to overthrow or usurp the position of temporal power which was enjoyed by the caste conscious Brahmins at that time. They thought Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had their positions in mind. They thought that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was pinpointing them to bring about a social revolution. Just like we all sympathize with Black Lives Matter, we don't believe in police brutality, we don't believe in stereotyping black men or walking along the street. But at the same time, I've noticed that within the Black Lives Matter movement, there's also a reverse stereotypization take place. There are certain stereotypes now which are affixed to the white men as well. So I just wonder whether the black power is now seen by the white people in charge as an attempt for social revolution to overthrow the white people and put more black people in positions of power. And historically speaking, it's a fact that when the disenfranchised become enfranchised, when the people have been pushed down are elevated to the top, when there's a revolution, they don't act a lot different from the people they replaced. And so the caste conscious Brahmins, not being spiritually attuned at all, just wanting to hold on to their temporal power, which they had inherited by virtue of their birth, only saw Lord Chaitanya's movement in terms of a social movement, and the only interpretation they gave to Lord Chaitanya chanting and dancing in the streets was that Lord Chaitanya wanted to create a social revolution to put more of the disenfranchised people into the positions of power and replace the Brahmins. So not recognizing that Lord Chaitanya had no interest in any social movements or social revolution whatsoever, that he was worshiping God, that he did not have the overthrow of the Brahmins in his sight. And by chanting Hare Krishna, Lord Chaitanya was leading his followers back to home, back to God. He was bypassing all social injustices, all social inequities. He didn't care a hoot about that. He didn't want to liberate people from economic depression and police brutality. He had a much more long-range view. He wanted to liberate all people, irrespective of black or white, rich or poor, high or low. His movement was to liberate each and every embodied soul from birth, death, disease, and old age and take them back to home, back to Godhead. But the Pasandis totally missed it. The Brahmins totally missed it. And so they went to the Qazi and they said, you should expel this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and you should ban his Harinama Sankirtana. So when Prabhupada talks about that in his literatures, he says that fortunately, the Hare Krishna movement, we're doing, following the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya, we're chanting in public places all over the civilized world, in Europe and America. And Prabhupada says, fortunately for us, no Pasandis have suggested or attempted to ban us from chanting in London, in Paris, in Sao Paulo, all the major cities of the world. The chanting, in fact, has become quite popular. People look forward to seeing the Hare Krishna devotees colorfully dressed with drums and cymbals, sometimes accordions and trumpets, dancing and chanting down the street, passing out prasadam and transcendental literature. Prabhupada says, generally speaking, nobody complains against us. Nobody asks to have us removed from a city, although such an attempt was made in Melbourne, Australia. If you listen to our Krishna Light show, which is broadcast from this same platform, Sundays at 1 o'clock, we're reading about how the devotees who distributed books in Melbourne, and I was among them, this is also my story. At one point, the Melbourne City Council decided they were going to remove the Hare Krishnas from chanting and dancing and distributing literature in the street. What they did, they invoked a law that was on the books from the early 1900s, which hadn't been enforced for decades and decades. But they dusted this law off and brought it up. And it said that you cannot exchange money, you cannot do business transactions on a sidewalk. So whenever we distribute a book and ask for a donation, there'd be a Melbourne City Councilman, and the most avid, the most zealous among them all, I don't remember what his actual name was, but we called him Square Jaw. He was like a hound dog. I mean, he had a nose that wherever there was a exchange of funds, wherever there was a donation being given anywhere in downtown Melbourne by a devotee, of course, we were quite visible as well, saffron robes and white robes. He would be right there with his citation book. So he would write a citation, give it to us. Turned out, there were some 1,600 citations to the Hare Krishnas, all class C, I believe, misdemeanors for accepting money on the streets. And what happened was, of all those 1,600, they took the one that they thought would most likely to evoke a guilty verdict, and then getting that one test case favorable to them, then they would go on to prosecute the other 1,600 and all the fines, and eventually it would pile into jail time, which shut down the Hare Krishna movement in Melbourne. And Prabhupada didn't care. Prabhupada visited right in the heat of all this. He went on a national TV show. The commentator said, "What are you going to do if you guys have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines and do jail time? How are you going to deal with this? Repression, persecution." Prabhupada said, "We'll just go somewhere else." And the commentator was like, "That's it? You'll just go somewhere else?" And Prabhupada said, "Yeah." Like, next question. Prabhupada wasn't attached. If you don't want eternal life, if you don't want liberation in Melbourne, there's plenty of other places we can go. We're not attached. It really left the commentator there with not a word to say. There was a long, awkward pause there in the interview before he thought of some other direction to go. Prabhupada said, "We'll go anywhere." And he said, "What?" And then he also made the point that it's very easy for the councilmen to issue citations because of the visibility factor. They can easily see you hundreds of yards away, and so you've accumulated all these 1,600. And Prabhupada said, "We're not attached. We can wear pants and shirt. Doesn't matter. It's a consciousness. It's the consciousness that we're separate from this body. We don't originate from matter. We're spiritual beings, and we need to get back home, back to the spiritual world." It's interesting to note that the effort on the behalf of Melbourne City Council totally failed. That one test case, we were defended by the Australian Civil Liberties Union, and we were deemed not guilty. So as soon as that test case failed, then all the other cases were dismissed. I remember there was a cartoon in the main paper, the Melbourne Age, the day after we won that court case, and it gave the total amount of money that the Melbourne City Council had spent to try and ban us, to get us off the street. It was tens of thousands of dollars. And the caption is, "Nothing to sing about." So not only did the Melbourne City Council waste a lot of the taxpayers' money in a failed effort to shut down the Hare Krishnas, but they got a slap across the wrist from the press as well. Now, that was in 1972. And more recently, Melbourne celebrated its bicentennial, 200 years. I forget what year it was. It was in the 90s, like 20 years later. And they had a huge stage program down at a central location downtown. Practically the whole population was there. It was broadcast nationwide. And they had various representative groups. all of whom make up what is called the Australian culture, the Australian population. One of the main events, one of the main performing acts, which was right at the crescendo, right before the culmination and the celebration, the fireworks and everything, was 200 Hare Krishnas on stage chanting Hare Krishna, practically the whole city of Melbourne chanting with them, and by proxy the entire nation. So everything ended happily. And just as the Pashandis 500 years ago tried to expel unsuccessfully Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the city of Navadvip, similarly, most cities welcome the Hare Krishnas. Most people look forward to seeing them on the streets. And in that solitary case where the city of Melbourne tried to ban us, it was unsuccessful, and now everybody's living happily and appreciatively side by side. But this offensive mentality which crops up is because of not vigorously understanding the categories of spirit and just indiscriminately lumping them all in. I do a lot of tours. We have like thousands and thousands of tourists who come off of the I-15 freeway. We have a northbound billboard, we have a southbound billboard, Krishna temple next exit, tours, buffet, gift store, animal park. A lot of people come off the freeway, and a lot of the locals, especially when they have relatives visiting from out of town, they like to bring them to the temple for a tour, feed carrots and apples to the animals and all. So when I come up before the altar, there are Radha and Krishna on our altar in the center. On our right-hand side is Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman, and left-hand side is Chaitanya Nityananda. So in the course of giving the tour, I say these words. I say these are plenary portions. These are the Supreme Lord occupying a higher position on the altar than Ram or Lord Chaitanya. The highest position is ceded to Radha Krishna because he's the fountainhead, and from him come many, many Vishnu expansions which are integrated, they're not separated, and they are fully as powerful as him. And this is what you can do if you're absolute. In the relative world, 1 minus 1 leaves 0. You take away 1, the original becomes less. But the absolute unlimited truth, you can expand, and you can even expand fully, and you can even expand fully thousands and thousands of times, and the original is unchanged, undiminished. So absolute math is 1 minus 1, you're still left with 1. Krishna is perfect and complete. Om Purnam, Mada Purnaminam, Purnat Purnamurachate, Purnasya Purnamaya Purnamiva Vishishate. Krishna is always complete. He's never incomplete. So even in the process of expanding himself into plenary portions, integrated parts, Vishnu tattvas, who are worshipable, who is just as powerful as him, even in all of that, he never becomes diminished. Then there's another category of expansion, which are the separated parts and parcels. And those are the living beings who don't have the same power. They not equal quantitatively to the Lord. Qualitatively, yes. God's eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. We also are eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. But we don't have the same level of power that he has. That's why we're not integrated expansions, but we're separated expansions. And so when we're facing the altar, I usually say, in my role as a tour guide, the reason that we're not portrayed in marble or stone or wood up there on the altar is that we're not plenary expansions, but we're partial expansions. We're compared like sunshine to the sun. Sunshine, particles of sunshine also have light and heat. The sun also has light and heat, but you can't get a sunburn from a simple particle of sunshine. But you can get a sunburn from the sun, even though it's 93 million miles away if you go out in August day with your shirt off for a half an hour. So the particle of sunshine is never on the level of the sun glow. So similarly, I tell people, we are never on the level of God or his integrated Vishnu Tattva expansions. And to think that way, or to act that way, or to promote that by writing a book or expounding a philosophy is an offensive, atheistic mentality. And the non-complimentary word for that is pashandi. So our encouragement, our warning today is don't be intellectually, philosophically lazy. Don't be an offender. Don't be a pashandi. Don't curse your life. Take the time and trouble to listen to these podcasts. Read the authorized literatures, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Make sure you get this right. If you don't get anything else right in your life, get this right. It's the most important thing. It'll do you the most good, and it'll do the most good to those whom you love. And here's a good starting point. It's the 10th chapter, 2nd verse in the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna declares to Arjuna and through Arjuna to each and every one of us, Name Vidur Sadagana. The difference between Krishna and the gods like Brahma and Shiva and Indra and Chanda is such that they don't even know who he is. They don't even have an idea about the extent of his powers and potencies. They know he's God. They worship him. That's how they get elevated to their exalted positions. But they cannot accommodate within their intellect the extent of Krishna's unlimited power. Ganatmanas tepi gunanvimentam hitava tirnashaka ishvaresha kalena yaryavi makashaka wupamsahe myabhyabhisham. Says the scientists and the demigods and the sages may eventually count the number of stars in the sky, count the number of drops of water in the ocean, count the number of grains of sand on the beach, but no one who is a separated expansion of the Lord, nor even the integrated expansions, know the extent of the powers of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, Krishna declares here, Name Vidu Shadaganam Prabhavam Aham Madhiri Devanam Marishanam Chasa. Neither the host, as I said, 33 million in each universe, of demigods, nor the great sages know my origin, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and the sages. So our caution is don't mix up the source and the byproducts. Don't mix up the creator and the created. Don't mix up the Lord and the servants. Don't mix up the whole and the part. You do so at your peril. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said this words by virtue of clarifying that statement of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Yavaraj quotes Lord Chaitanya, Ishwaradbe Bedha Mani Haya Aparada. It's offensive. There are two paths of offensiveness. One is to differentiate between the Vishnu Tattva forms of the Lord. Whether the Lord appears as Ram or Krishna or Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada gives the example of the Vaidurya stone. It's a stone that was talked about in the Middle Ages, which, depending on how you hold it up to the light, it shows itself as being sometimes green, sometimes red, sometimes blue, sometimes yellow. The stone is one, but it appears differently according to how you hold it up into the light. So God is one. Krishna and Vishnu, they are the full plenary personality of Godhead. They may have different personalities according to time, place, and circumstance, but they are all undifferentiated, integrated, plenary Vishnu portions of the Lord. Now, on the other hand, so it's offensive to differentiate between the Vishnu Tattva forms of the Lord, and it is also offensive to think of the forms of the demigods as equally important, as equally effective, as equally powerful as the forms of the Lord in his Vishnu Tattvas. So you understanding us so far? Are you following all of this? I know that if you just happened upon this podcast or this Facebook cast for the first time, there are probably a lot of words and terms being thrown out that you haven't heard before. But I hope that we're being clear enough and succinct enough and emphatic enough that you're getting the point here. Don't mix up ourselves and God, whatever you do. This is further stated in the Skanda Purana on this point. Vasudeva parijagya na anya deva upashate. Na means not. Devata means the demigods, not God, but the demigods. Upashate, one should not worship the demigods. Ma shra mataram parijagya swapacham bandite saham. It says one who worships the demigods after having given up the worship of Krishna and Vishnu is like a man who gives up the protection of his mother for the shelter of a witch. All right, let's repeat that, okay? One who, I'm going to take another lozenge with your permission. Had a lot of classes yesterday, so I'm just a little sore-throated. A person who worships the demigods and gives up Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, is like a man who gives up the protection of his mother for a shelter of the witch. Also in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Ye pyanya devata yajanti tebi mami yajanti abidi porvakam. I'm sure most of you had the experience of being pulled over for speeding on the freeway. And the gentleman who pulled you over is an authorized, bona fide representative of the government. He's CHP or UHP, California Highway Patrol, Utah Highway Patrol. He comes up to your window and you suggest that in lieu of his writing a ticket, he just take a cash gift from you. Now, what's wrong with that? You may argue, well, he's got the uniform on, he's driving the car with the icon and everything. He's representing the government. So if I give him money, the government should be satisfied. That may be your reasoning, right? But the problem with that is that's not the proper way to give the money to the government. That's illegal. That may result in not only you getting a speeding charge, but a much more serious charge of trying to bribe a government official. That's not the proper way. You have to let him write the ticket and you pay your fine by dropping a check in the mail or calling with a credit card. That way you won't get any more trouble than you've already got into. So just like with a tree, there's a proper way to water the tree, and then there's an improper way of watering the tree. The proper way of watering the tree is to put the water in the root. Then all the branches, leaves, and flowers and twigs, they'll be nourished. But if you reason that tree is a tree, it's one, doesn't matter where I put the water, it's all the same, it's all one. The flower, the twigs, the root, the leaves, they're all one, they're all part of the tree, so it shouldn't matter where I put the water. I can put it on the flower, I can put it on the twigs, I can put it on the leaves, and it will have the same effect as if I put it on the root. That's not true at all. So the Basandi, the atheist and the offender, he says, it's all one. It's all one God. God is everywhere. God is everything. You're God. I'm God. It doesn't matter who I worship or who I serve or where I put my energy or my path. No, like you may say, my body is one. So in feeding or in nourishing the body, doesn't matter what opening I use. It's all one. I can put the food in my ear. I can stick it up my nose. No, there's a proper way to feed the body. There's a proper way to water the tree, and there's an improper way. So there are Vishnu Tattvas, integrated expansions of the Lord, to whom it's proper to give your worship and it's proper to honor. And it is entirely improper to elevate superficially an ordinary living being or a demigod to the status of being worshipable. What the essential fault, essential offensiveness is of the Pasandiyas, they bring God down and they bring us up and lump it all in the middle. No, there is God and he is the Lord and we're the part. He is the whole and he is the Lord and we're the servant. He is the whole and we're the part. Now, the difference among others between worshiping the demigods and worshiping the Lord is that when you worship the demigods, you're only going to get temporary material results. And they'll be lost in due course of time. In the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 23rd verse, Krishna says, Antavatu palam tejam tad bhavityapamedisham deva deva yajo yanti mad bhakti yanti mamapi. Specifically, Krishna says that the Pashandis are men of small intelligence, and an indication of their undeveloped intelligence is that they lump in the demigods with God, and doing so they worship the demigods, the result of which is they get temporary and limited fruits. Ultimately, those who are really good at worshiping the demigods, they go to the planet of the demigods, but Krishna says a great opportunity has therein been lost, because with the same amount of energy and the same amount of worship, but with a more exercise of intelligence, one could have worshipped Krishna and gone to the eternal planet of Krishna. So instead of worshiping the demigods for temporary fruits, one could have worshipped Krishna and gotten eternal liberation, eternal life from birth, death, disease, and old age. And here's the epitomal story. I'll just end with this example this morning session. Hiranyakashipu was a man of less intelligence, and he was inclined towards demonism, causing pain to others, exploiting others for his own aggrandizement and his own sense gratification. So he did severe penances and austerities for 125 years by the calculation of the demigods, to the point that the ants ate all the flesh of his body, reduced him to a skeleton, but because of his yogic powers, his life force was still circulating within his bones. And Lord Brahma took note of the extreme asceticism practiced by Hiranyakashipu and was compelled to appear before him, restore his flesh magically, and ask him for a boon. So Hiranyakashipu wanted immortality from Lord Brahma. He thought that if he could get an imperishable material body, then he could unlimitedly harass and tyrannize and make the lives miserable of all the people in the three worlds, and put his foot on everybody else's neck and dominate them and tyrannize them and exploit them. So he wanted the best of both worlds. He wanted immortality, not for the purpose of serving the Lord and transitioning from this world of birth and death to the spiritual world. He wanted to stay here. Here is just fine for him, to make others suffer and to make others cry and to get a perverse sort of pleasure from others' suffering. And so he wanted to get the boon of immortality so he could stay here and continue to perform sinful activities. But Brahma said, I can't do that. I can't give you something that I don't have, because I'm not Vishnu Tattva. I'm not an integrated expansion. I'm a separated expansion. And any power that I have to rule or to create universes is borrowed plumes from Krishna alone. So I can't give you that. You have to ask for something else. So he got various benedictions. He couldn't be killed in the land or the sea, inside the house or outside of the house, by day or night, by any man or beast, by any weapon or anything. So he thought he had all his bases covered, and he went on to commit multiple sinful activities and to cause the entire universe, metaphorically, to cry and to suffer. Now, when he offended the devotee of Lord Vishnu, his own son, 5-year-old son named Prahlad, at that point, the benediction of Brahma and the protection of Krishna faced each other. There was a confrontation, basically a duel, a cage match between the power of Brahma as the chief of all the demigods and Krishna, who creates millions and millions of Brahmas and millions of universes. So the benediction of Brahma, that Hiranyakashipu would not be killed in day or night, inside the house or outside of the house, by man or beast and all like that, was ironically upheld by Lord Vishnu, because he didn't want to cause his devotee to lose face. But in spite of the protection, in spite of the boons of Brahma, who is a separated part and parcel of the Lord, when those boons came into direct conflict with the boon of Krishna's protection for one who shelters under him by chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The boons of Brahma collapsed. Well, they were observed in terms of the letter of the law. Krishna did not break any of the boons that Brahma had given him, but he still found a loophole and killed Hiranyakashipu. He even predicted that when the demigods went to him originally and complained that Hiranyakashipu is causing so much pain and suffering all over the universe. Can you do something about it? And Vishnu said, at that time, when Brahma's boon to protect Hiranyakashipu in so many multifarious ways comes into direct confrontation with my promise to protect my sheltered devotees, when that happens, I'm going to kill him in spite of the benedictions of the demigod Brahma. Nirvaraya prashanteya shashuta mahatmanam pradadari denishe pi varorjitam. In spite of the benedictions of Lord Brahma, I'm going to kill Hiranyakashipu. So that's our concluding story here, and I hope that in the narration of this morning's Motivational Monday, that even if you just happen to come across this broadcast by chance and don't have any of this background, I hope that we've laid it out for you sufficiently. I hope we've inspired you enough that you'll have a second intellectually inspired, intellectually awakened look at the Hare Krishna philosophy, at the process of chanting Hare Krishna, that you'll have a look at the identity of Krishna through the eyes of pure devotees and through the bona fide chain of disciplic succession, which is descending to us from the Lord himself, and make your life successful. And if you're familiar with this and you have the contents and you have the background, thank you so much. You have a lot of choices. There are a lot of other devotees who are explaining many of these same points, and I'm so honored that you chose to exercise the option of being here with Caru in little old Spanish Fork, Utah, on yet again Motivational Monday. And those who are in that latter category, thank you, Anjali, again. Bill, Hare Krishna, Rupa Manjari, Sundari Priya, George Stalwarts, by Bobby, my wife, just on the other side of this wall. Vanessa Ganga, Guru Charan, you're becoming a regular. Please accept my obeisances. Jimmy, Hare Krishna from Minnesota. Malini Prita, all the way from Malaysia, a wonderful cook. I want you to come and visit. In exchange for free room and board, I want you to cook some of those preparations and offer them to our own Radha Shama Sundar. And whenever you make it to this American side, Radhe Sham from Tooele. Anyone who's on this, you're invited to like it. You're invited to make a comment. You're invited to push the little buttons and all like that. The more interaction we have, the more this will be pushed higher in the ratings and the more people will have the opportunity to come across Krishna consciousness. We have a YouTube channel. I'm not sure how you access it. I think it's either Churu Das or Utah Krishnas, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of videos, hundreds of talks, hundreds of everything you ever wanted to know about spiritual life, about the Hare Krishna movement. Go to YouTube, search the Utah Krishnas or the Churu Das YouTube video channel, and click the subscribe button. That way everything will come to you automatically in due course of time. Thank you. A couple of people are listening, but not until I asked them to like did they do that. Mr. Willie, who often does it, I'll have to give credit there. Mr. Willie is a wonderful, wonderful man. He's 1 foot in LDS and 1 foot in Krishna, so he would have understood a lot of the points that we talked about in the early part of this talk. Christine is a very erudite devotee lady who lives in France. So glad you can join us intercontinentally, not only Christine and Malini Pritabi. So again, Try to do as much as you can. If you have resonance, if you have sympathy with these talks, like it, hit the little hearts, hit the little stars, share it with your friends. Let's get the word out. It's a very important topic. It makes the difference between having a successful life or a muddled life of misery and purposefulness and lack of meaning. And so it is our deep desire that as many people get familiar with the sublime and insurpassable, incomparable philosophy of Bhagavad Dharma as passed down through the disciplic succession through our own beloved Guru, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you again for being with us. Motivational Monday. We'll continue on this same topic because I didn't even get halfway through my notes today. Be with us again tomorrow on Transcendental Tuesday. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare